Okay, we should be recording now, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're coming in from today. My name is Bart Purcell. I'm the CEO here at Unison, and thank you for attending the second installment of our 2025 Unison webinar series, Empowering Faculty with Data with Dr. Chad Brassil and Dr. Amy Goodburn. Before I hand it over to them, I just want to give everyone a very quick overview of Unison. We have some new faces here from around higher education. So very quickly, Unison is a nonprofit consortium of 16 institutions. We started in 2014. Unison was founded by Indiana University, the University of Florida, the University of Michigan, and Colorado State University. And the goal of Unison when its formation is to ensure the Academy maintains control in their digital transformation efforts, specifically control of aspects of curriculum and course content, as well as control of data, all the data that's generated as our students engage in different ed tech platforms. These days, we can sum up our mission as accelerating student success initiatives at our member institutions through data and affordability. And we have what I like to call four value streams that fit underneath that mission. The first is advantageous contracts with edtech suppliers. So we represent almost 1 million students at this point across our 16 institutions. So we try and use that to our advantage when we negotiate with edtech solution providers. Right now, we have agreements with 13 different ed tech solution providers, including Instructure, Desire to Learn, Top Hat, and Packback. And in addition to trying to get good pricing in place for our members, the other part of these contracts often includes data, and that is sharing data back to our members through the Unison data platform. The second value proposition here are teaching and learning communities. So these are where different folks from around our consortiums get together on a regular cadence to focus on everything from faculty development to accessibility. We have a community for LMS administrators and learning tool administrators, learning analytics practitioners, and application developers. Actually, Chad helped put together a hackathon this spring where a lot of our application developers came to Nebraska and worked on a variety of projects across about a week's time. The third value stream is Engage. This is a digital content program that uses the inclusive access model. And we estimate since 2017, that's when this started, we've saved students about $132 million across the consortium in textbook costs as well as digital courseware costs. And the last value stream, and one I'm sure you'll hear more about here when Chad and Amy start, is the Unison Data Platform, or the UDP. So this is a data platform that's designed to bring together data from a student information system, a learning management system, as well as a growing list of all those other ed tech solutions that are in use across our consortium. And just to give you a sense of scale, in 2024, across the consortium, we saw about 13.8 billion clickstream events from 19 different ed tech environments come into the UDP. And I'm sure you'll see a little bit on how the University of Nebraska is making use of those different data points. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Amy Goodburn. She's the Senior Associate Vice Chancellor and Dean of Undergraduate Education, as well as a Professor of English at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and she is also a member of the Unison Board. And I'd also like to introduce Dr. Chad Brassil. He is an Associate Professor of Biological Sciences, also the Faculty Director of Undergraduate Analytics at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And since I've been at Unison, it's been about 3.5 years. It's been a joy to kind of watch the journey that Chad and Amy and Heath Tuttle, who was at Nebraska until about a year ago, and now Brett Blackman have been on, in how they approach bringing analytics, not just to faculty, which is what we'll hear most about today, but also to a lot of the different stakeholder groups around the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. So we hope to have about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. I'll do my best to keep an eye on the chat. And with that, Chad and Amy, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Bart. And welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we're really happy to have this opportunity to share some of the work that's going on at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln to empower faculty with data, mainly because of our Unison partnership. Before we dive into the tools that Chad has developed, I wanted to provide some brief context for UNL and the work that we've been trying to do. For those of you who are not aware, UNL is Nebraska's public land-grant research university. We enroll about 12 demographics. So we have been active participants in the First Gen Forward Network, and this year we're named to champion status. And then we've also been recognized for our work with our military and veteran students And we've been recognized for that for many years. Key to those recognitions is our university's focus on using data to understand and benchmark our students' success. And we do this primarily in four different ways. At a really granular level, we've been using data to identify and outreach to individual students to address their needs. When we pull back a little bit, we've also been using data to understand trends in students' experiences based on demographics such as first generation, low income, transfer, or military students. And our goal, of course, is to close gaps so that all students, regardless of their demographic background or identities, successfully complete their degrees. We've also been using data to try to understand barriers that might be contributing to these inequities, barriers in our processes, in our policies, in our practices that we as an institution can change. So rather than focusing on changing the student, changing our institution and what we're doing to center our students' experiences. And then finally, we've been seeking to engage our campus stakeholders in inquiry and reflection on data so that they can identify problems and opportunities for improving our students' experiences and their success. So with respect to empowering faculty with data, two factors have been critical, I think, to our success. And one is creating Chad's role as faculty director of undergraduate analytics. He is the bridge or the translator between our data people and our faculty. And two, it's using the Unison data platform to leverage our Canvas LMS data in particular. So the course demographic suite that you're going to be seeing today was developed to address a need to provide faculty with data specific to their courses. So when I shared data with faculty about UNL's retention and degree completion rates or equity gaps, I frequently hear some variation of the question, what do these data have to do with my teaching? And it was hard to translate what an 86% first year retention rate means for a faculty member teaching first year writing or introductory life sciences. They know the students in their courses and they assign them the grades. But there's no clear through line between that work, which is undertaken on a day to day level, and an annual metric such as retention or degree completion that's recorded by the university. So we created dashboards in Canvas called the Course Demographic Suite to do three things. One, to help instructors become aware of the demographic populations in their courses. Two, to sponsor reflection on the academic performance trends happening in their courses based on demographic backgrounds and identities. And three, to engage faculty in conversations about potential opportunities for pedagogical and instructional change that might better enable all students to succeed in their courses. So Chad is now going to show you what this suite of dashboards looks like and how faculty have or can use them to support their inquiry into their teaching for better supporting student success.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Amy. And you've already heard some of the context, and I'm going to really break the next part into two big chunks, the technology and the design, which I think is instrumental in that technology interface. But then I'll spend kind of an equal amount of time, I think, on the conversation with faculty, because that's increasingly a really important part of what we're doing and what I see us doing in the future to move this forward. As Amy introduced, the UNL Course Demographic Suite is a central element of what we'll talk about. I'll break that down. It is really there's some technology behind it, but also the design of how these dashboards are put together and how they're the nuances I'll talk a little bit about because I think it's important to their implementation. Before I get into those details, I want to just make a note of the big approach here, which Amy kind of talked about in length, but I'll just say it's really to engage faculty, to get them to think about stuff. We're utilizing these leading indicators, meaning not just what we call lagging indicators, the grades at the end of the course, but we're utilizing all the stuff that the Unison data platform makes available to us that's happening real time as the courses are playing out. And another thing that we're really doing potentially uniquely at Nebraska is implementing this at scale. We'll talk about that. And as Amy alluded to, the driving objective for me in all of this is really, one, to motivate change, to motivate faculty to make some pedagogical change. And if they are making changes, maybe they've already made changes or we have motivated change, these dashboards that you'll see allow faculty to monitor the effectiveness. They're the thermometer that gives them feedback on, is this working? And we'll revisit that a little bit. So keep that in mind. Those are the big objectives and the approach. So to jump into some of the details, we really need to think like a faculty, and a faculty thinks there's one computer system that runs the entire university, and that's Canvas, which is our LMS here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And so we're not alone. Iowa, Penn State, many Unison institutions have come up with some kind of left-hand menu. So this is our left-hand menu is the entry point. We call it Course Insights, which is also not unique among Unison institutions. But faculty at Nebraska will click on Course Insights and they see these tiles. And that tells me, as the person who's about to feed them a dashboard, I know who they are and I know what course we're talking about. So everything that's coming through this Course Insights is instructor and course specific and at their fingertips from a faculty standpoint. So here's a big overview of the course demographic suite and all the parts of it. There's these 5 or 6 dashboards. It depends on how you count them. The first 1, 2, and 3 are using very explicitly Unison data platform data. 4 and 5 could use UDP data, but I pull on institutional archive data because I can go back farther. I can get like a 15, 20-year perspective on that because that's just letter grades. You'll see that 1, 2, and 3 are using those details within the course that the LMS feeds into the Unison data platform. 1 through 4 are instructor specific, so they're giving you this customized view, and 5 and 6 step out of that particular course and give you a perspective across the university. So these are using different data sources in various cases. They're using different perspectives, but there's a commonality. There's a common design, common visuals, common metrics, and that's very intentional so that we can have a conversation and pass it off. A dean can look at something, pass it to a curriculum committee. Curriculum committee can pass it to a team of instructors or individual instructors, and back and forth we can be talking about the same stuff, even if the back end is a little bit different. So I'm going to walk through these. I'm going to spend a little bit more time here on the first one to just point out some of the design elements and thought that goes into this when we're thinking about something that is instructor specific. It's for an instructor. And as an instructor myself, I have a little bit of an intuitive sense about how things should be put together, but I'll mention at the end the iterative process that comes in building these. So this is called demographic info. Instructor, imagine an instructor might look at this about now. I'm about 4 weeks or so before courses are going to start. I could look at this to get a sense of who is going to be in my course. So before I started this work, I might start planning, what am I going to do this upcoming semester? And I'm imagining this activity, and I start picturing a student, and I realize I'm picturing a white male continuing generation 3.9 student, and I'm picturing myself. Right? And there's lots of students in that class that have different backgrounds than myself. This explicitly lays it out. It shows me all the different boxes that students are coming from in that course as I'm imagining my course, getting to know my course. These are all interactive mouse overs. I have an example icon there showing you an example of what you might mouse over. But I'll point out a nuance here of something that is very intentional. Those boxes of race, ethnicity, the denominator is not people, but identities. So for example, if a student selected, when they enrolled at the university, both Hispanic and Native, that's going to appear twice so that we don't mush together students with multiple identities into another box and therefore kind of cloud and erase those identities. We're showing you all the identities. But it's a nuance, and I think a thoughtful nuance to achieve our objective here, which is really to illustrate the spectrum of boxes, the spectrum of identities across a range of demographic metrics, so faculty can just consider it, right, and think about it. Somebody put in the chat questions about how do we protect student identity, and I'll mention this a couple times. And this one I'll say that I'm showing every student, even if it's a single, even if there's, for example, I think that green box might be the one Native student who's in this course, and that one box is still shown because in this data, we're not crossing it with anything else. So you can't deduce who that student is by saying, well, which student got the C plus? And then you figure out, oh, that's the student with this identity. Later, we'll talk about some aggregation rules to protect student identity. So our general rule is if this information is not available at an individual level already to a faculty, we don't make it available through this dashboard. We're showing it in aggregate. But in this case, I want you to see, I want the instructor to see all of those boxes per se. And I've shown here are some of our high priorities: race, ethnicity. We have parent education, meaning first gen, continuing gen. But there's a whole set of expanding demographics that we show here, in part in response to requests from faculty. So rural versus urban, I think, is a great example. That came as a request from a faculty who wanted to know about urban-rural breakdown. They were writing a grant and wanted to know about what that distribution was. This was a couple of years ago. It's kind of become a big stakeholder conversation in this country. So it's really great that we can provide that to our faculty. So this is a growing list, continues to expand. And this list comes through many of the dashboards that I'll show you here in a minute. So if we move through these in the way you might move through them in time in a course, we come to the second demographic dashboard available through Course Insights, which we call Click Demographics. Say you assign your students a PDF to read, or you ask them to look at this website, you provide a link, and you want to know how many are clicking through on that link. This will show you either through all files or all tools or all the links, or I can choose some selectors to look at the individual links that I have assigned, how many students have clicked through at least once, or what's the average click rate on the particular files or things that I have provided to the students. And then we can disaggregate that by many of those key demographics. So in this case, I'm showing you first gen versus continuing gen click rates disaggregated. This is something I can look on in week 1 or week 2. Here I'm showing you what it looks like at the end of the semester. But this is a very leading indicator that says, all right, maybe I need to do some more messaging to bring those click rates up in week 1 or week 2 before I have grades back. This one is actually complemented. So what I'm showing you here is that aggregated. We're clustering, say, all the first gens and all the continuing gen students together. We've complemented this. Our IT group has put together this complementary dashboard that sits in Course Insights to also give those leading indicators at an individual level. So the black line on here is showing a particular student in this course. The blue line is the average click rate for the course, and these are 7-day rolling averages. This is actually a great example of the sharing across the consortiums. This is an idea that Penn State conceived of, and I thought, oh, this is great. And we borrowed that idea and rolled it into our dashboard, this 7-day rolling average. So you can see that this student for the first part of the semester was really clicking pretty much on average with the course, but then near the end of the semester, they started to click through at much lower rates. And so this might be a reason where an instructor might want to reach out to that student, or maybe it's correlated with some low grades, providing that instructor this information on what's happening. This is across the whole course. We're not looking at individual click rates and individual assignments for that student, but here's an example where we have separated the demographic information, but we're allowing the instructor to go down to that individual level for interventions with that student. Okay, so step back now to the course demographic suite, where we're now aggregating things across the demographic levels. Our third step, and probably our most widely used dashboard in this set, is what we call performance demographics. This allows us to go down to individual assignments, or in this case, what I've showed you is the assignment groups. If this was your course, you would look at those clusters and they would immediately make sense because it's the assignment groups that the instructor created for that course. Surveys, quizzes, attendance. And then we can look at the average score disaggregated, in this case by first gen, continuing gen. Those are the two bubbles. The size of that bubble is proportional to the number of students in that box. So we have more continuing gen students than we do have first gen students. So those bubbles are larger. And then there's a difference. We put a lot of ink. That pink rectangle is highlighting where we see these demographic differences. So the exams, as you mouse over that, so there's a 9 percentage point gap between our first gen and continuing gen students in this particular course. This is really useful. This feeds instructor curiosity. Many institutions, if they provide some of this data, kind of left at an overall course grade, which we'll get to. This allows you to ask questions and go down. So, for example, the first time I looked at this was for a course in which I knew I had letter grade disparity by demographics, and my hypothesis was that it was going to either be at the exams or it was those quizzes. Somewhere in there, I was curious, where does the gap open up? What do I need to address? And when I dug down to the individual assignments within that course at the end of the semester, I realized, oh, this is happening in a participation-only journal entry that they were turning in the first week. And so it completely changed my future intervention. I need to engage those students who I'm not seeing in week 1 and week 2 and get them on board, to keep them on board throughout the semester. So really powerful tool that allows instructors to ask the questions and to go deeper. Number 4, grade demographics for instructors. So back here on performance demographics at the bottom, there's a link that you can't see. If an instructor clicks on that link, it takes them out of their course-specific portal and takes them to a portal across courses. So this is my example of Life 121. It's an introductory biology class across multiple semesters. And now I can look at those long-term trends, which is often a question that instructors want to think about and address. They've made a particular change in a semester. They want to see what the effects of that are. Again, like the theme here is I'm constantly feeding academics curiosities because we're curious creatures by nature. Fall 2018 is a nice illustration. That was, you see that's just a brown dot, and it's what we call aggregated over here. That is an honors section that I taught that had like enrollment of 20. And so if I don't have at least 5 students in both boxes, in this case, underrepresented and represented, it's going to aggregate those total scores. In this case, is an honor section. Everybody had an A, B, or C. But that illustrates an example of how we're protecting student identity with low numbers. Because we're doing this at scale, large enrollment class, small enrollment classes, so we need automatic ways in the back end to protect that identity. And then step 5, the grade demographics by levels. What I'm showing you here is the DFW rate, letter grade D, F, where we withdrew from the course. From fall 2020 through summer 2023, all that's adjustable. Right now for a bunch of subjects at the University of Nebraska. And when I say by level, this is fully customizable. So we could look at DFW rates for all courses at the entire university over a chunk of time. We can look at colleges. Here I've looked at subjects. We can look at 100, 200, 300, 400 level classes. We can drill all the way down to an individual class, say BIOS 101, for an academic year. We don't go lower than that. It's essentially the compromise of the granularity of data that we're going to offer. And this is many people, and we'll talk about this in a minute, are able to look at this across the university. It provides context. It provides context to your course. So for example, an instructor came to me and said, my DFW rate's going up these last 2 years, but that's happening everywhere, right? Across the university. I said, I don't know, let's look. And we pulled this up together and we went through and saw, oh no, it was just that person's class. It wasn't everybody's class. So it gives you some context to what's happening. Also doesn't isolate you. There are some institutions that provide say this course-specific information to the instructor, but don't provide this broader context. And so then everybody looked at their own course data, feels really bad about themselves, feels really isolated. I think this complementation of instructor-specific information, but institutional context opens up the conversation. So we're all in this together, working towards solutions. Knowing what's happening, for example, in 100 level BIOS courses, chem courses, physics courses, math courses, that can provide a lot of context to those STEM instructors about what's happening. And this is also our most powerful dashboard. I can click on any of these, and at any level, here I'm showing subject, but if I clicked on math 100 level classes, it would blow it out over time. So here I'm showing you math 100 level classes across time at the university, and I've added multiple metrics. So our top bar there of the light green, I guess, is the doubly disadvantaged students, the male first-gen students, much higher DFW rates than our doubly advantaged students or female continuing generation students, and things are falling in between as we kind of nationally expect, but we can see now what's happening with those trends across the university. And full credit to math for basically allowing me to show this data, and they're deeply engaged in reflection on this data. This last dashboard is less used. It's a little experimental. I sort of throw it up here as an advertisement for other institutions, especially Unison institutions who might be interested in going in this direction. This is a project that about 9 Big Ten institutions have put together in support from the APLU, in which we shared data from about 12 or 13 gateway courses. And this, in principle, addresses that question of somebody saying, well, that's just, that's what we need to do. Like all sociology classes need to have that level of rigor. Well, we can look across courses, across institutions and ask, well, how is that? Is that the case? Like, here's a bunch of peer institutions that we aspire to be part of. How do we sit within that context? So it's a little bit theoretical. I haven't had a lot of use of this. Actually, the use I've seen has been fairly positive. People look at it and then quickly go back to thinking about what we're doing at Nebraska. But I think there's utility in having this cross-institutional conversation, and Unison is well positioned to facilitate that. So I guess that's an advertisement. Reach out to me if you're interested. I'm noticing, I'll hit on one thing. Somebody asked a question about small enrollment classes. Let me hit back to this one, for example. Well, one, this level where we're looking across the institution at, say, all BIOS 400 level classes. So those are our senior level classes. They might have small enrollment, but I can aggregate them all together. That's one solution to looking at small enrollment classes, is look at multiple courses, maybe multiple sections or multiple courses at a level, so that I have enough numbers so that they don't get aggregated and I can see these trends. The other solution to small enrollment classes, in this particular class, I've taught it multiple times. This is a fairly large enrollment class outside of that 2018. But over here, it's a little hard to see, but on the right-hand side, I have here combined semesters. It's a drop-down that allows me to say combine 2 or 3 or 4. I choose the number of semesters over time to push together. And so it sums, for example, fall 2019 and fall 2020. It'll push those together, sum them, and then show that it's aggregated. And by summing semesters together, I can often overachieve those low numbers, so I can look at trends. So you might not be able to look at semester by semester trends, but I could look at 2 or 3 year trends over time, and that might allow me to address my question. So we try to give all those tools. We try to engage everybody. Clearly, it's a little easier with large enrollment, but I have been fairly thoughtful about how to on-ramp small enrollment classes, and I don't want to leave them out of this conversation. Okay, jumping up ahead here to this cross-institutional dashboard. I'm going to leave that aside for a minute, and we're happy to answer questions. We'll have plenty of time for questions here at the end. I want to talk about another tool that I really developed to help some other institutions, but we have used at Nebraska as well. I call it grade by demographics, but the key is here is that it's an open source report. Instead of all the stuff I previously showed you, the backend that runs this is Tableau. So it's a fairly expensive, institutional level software license that we have to maintain. Grade demographics this grade by demographics is a report just built using R, so an open source product. It creates an HTML report that can be emailed around. So a very different scale. It's fairly easy to use. You still need access to data, but you can put together data in a fairly simple format, run it through this open source report that's available here at this GitHub site. The output is similar graphics with these bubbles. I particularly like the bubble with the ink on the demographic difference, and with mouse overs, it has all those features and some additional benefits. The benefits is that we can put into it lots of text for context, lots of institutional links, questions, reflective questions, embed figures in that, and embed very specific figures. So as I mentioned with the Tableau dashboards previously, it is really about feeding faculty's curiosity. So there's lots of options, like filter on this, show me my gen ed courses, take it to 100. So there's an infinite number of figures that I could create in one of those dashboards. That sometimes makes it hard to have a conversation around a figure. So our UNL College of Arts and Sciences last year used this static report, this open source report, curated the text, to specifically point to University of Nebraska resources and some reflective questions that we felt were very relevant to the college. A customized report through a script was created for each of the departments showing their, like here I'm showing you BIOS 100 level data, and that was circulated to each of the departments. So there's a common set of figures that the college can have a conversation with the department. That advanced this conversation. It's definitely on the theme with empowering faculty, right? Different ways to bring data to them in different contexts, and there's a role for this static report. Influence, to give full credit to the Seismic group out of University of Michigan. We really took their idea and tweaked it and modified it. I want to mention another thing I call meeples is peoples, and I'll describe what that means in a minute. This is less technology, but just as great design. This is really prototyped, hasn't been rolled out yet outside of a couple faculty who've been working on it. And by less technology, I mean that this is built using these little game pieces. For those of you who might be board game people, you'll recognize these as meeples. They're little cutout characters. And in this approach, well, the context here is something more like say a 45-minute workshop where I have either teams of people or participants, known participants who are going to show up. I process in advance and I print out little stacks of about 12 pieces of paper that are custom printed for that person in their particular course. And then they get out this bag of meeples, and it tells me in this case that 1 meeple equals 3 students. So we're talking about 300 students, probably in like a large introductory course. And then they go through these sheets and they work through some of that same kind of data, but moving meeples in little piles from one sheet to the other side. In this case, really with the large objective to slow down that data processing and think, well, what would it take to move, and as this green arrow is indicated, how many the DFW students would we have to move in the underrepresented box from DFW to ABC to eliminate this demographic difference, right? So kind of a slow form, very different level of technology, but engaging data in other kinds of ways. So that's in the development. Check back with me next year and I'll let you know how it works. So I've mentioned a couple of these platforms, the Tableau-based demographic dashboards, the R-based, more static report, an interactive kind of a space, all ways in which you're working with data, and showed you some of the nuances of the way I think that can be set up really importantly. But equally important is the conversation with faculty. How have we staged and how have we developed that conversation? Right from the beginning, I realized faculty are good at articulating costs, but bad at envisioning benefits. So we have to overcome some faculty skepticism. I think we've overcome that. If there was advice I would give, it's, well, number 4 there is very purposely at number 4. We had to demonstrate some benefits. I had to build some prototype dashboards, earlier versions of what I've shown you, iterate those based on feedback, take them to faculty learning communities, have case studies of somebody who's used this data for something, some reflection, and then have the conversation about, well, how should we deal with data governance? So things don't get sort of locked down because we're articulating the costs, but we don't see those benefits. But my role as both faculty and faculty director of undergraduate analytics is also puts me in spaces where I can have conversations. So AAUP mixers over wine. It's literally over a glass of wine where people have said to me, hey, I like what you're doing, Chad, but I'm really worried about X and Y. And I'll show you in the next slide what came directly from that conversation over wine. And then multiple conversations with the faculty senate where we present stuff, we get feedback. All of that is really important so that it's a campus-wide continuing conversation. This is the utility and scope statement that came from that, initiated from that glass of wine. I said, great, let's write that down. Let's have associate deans give feedback on it. Let's move it up the administrative chain. So it's being wordsmithed by the highest level of the university and put on a top website. The point of this is to create this culture of trust, culture of support for the faculty, but also infused in this culture of data. And you'll see if you look at those words, it really is about creating essentially a safe space for faculty to say, it's okay, we're going to look at this data, and our purpose is to support the student and to support you as an instructor. I give an example on that website that I haven't printed here, that often we have our largest demographic differences in our gateway introductory courses for reasons that you sort of understand on first principles. And good departments often take their best instructors and put them at those gateway courses. So if you lined it up, you would have your best instructors would have your biggest demographic differences, right? So I think that illustrates that you can't just blindly look at these things. And I love this last statement. The whole point of the DFW rate conversation and what we're doing is not to reduce the complexity to just a number, but to expand the number of tools that we have to increase the complexity of what we're looking at. So we can see some things that we haven't seen, so we can take the temperature of what we're doing and see if the change that we're making is effective. Many of this, in many cases, the introduction to this from faculty come from various presentations that I've given, either campus-wide or departmental-wide or college-wide. And I'm always opening with something like this that tells why we're doing what we're doing. In various cases, if there's a university strategic plan or some mission that you can tie it into, it really orients us. Like, what we're doing here is really important. It's really big. This is what we're trying to achieve. So you can't miss that, to point that out to faculty. Another strategy that we have used at Nebraska, and I understand this is a little bit going on our own path. Many places have a series of gates to show faculty the dashboards that I just showed you. There's some training you have to participate, or you have to go to a workshop, or be part of a learning community. At the University of Nebraska, those first 4, there's no gate. They're instantly available for all instructors today at the University of Nebraska. The one asterisk on that is if you're a graduate student TA, because we don't automatically create Tableau accounts for them, they have to ask. But all faculty instructors have instant access to all of that. And I'll touch on that here again in a minute. The exception being number 5, when we look at grade demographics by level, if we're looking across the institution, there's a little garden wall. It's not hard for me to put you over that garden wall. You show up for a workshop or you express some interest. So we've kept a little bit of a garden wall there because you should know a little bit about what you're doing before you're wandering through that space. But all of that is to say, these dashboards are not the Iowa Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. No, you build these things, you put them one click away from everybody, and nobody will click on it. Which is a little bit of the counter narrative that says, well, we need to have a lot of gateways here, or student or faculty will abuse it. They won't care. They'll never come. They'll never look. We get people on board by having campus-wide workshops, seminars, all these things I've talked about, newsletters, press releases, and we're going to continue to do more. We have to continue to do more to bring this to instructors to look at. I have to say, I can't cite an example of somebody that has really abused this data, right? If they have strong biases against first-gen students, they probably already have those biases, and having a dashboard that they'll never find is not really contributing to it. That's my take right now. We'll see. We're playing the experiment out. We'll see how it goes. But right now, I'm an advocate for this openness, because faculty can go walk down the hallway and tell somebody about it. And there's this kind of passing of information that happens outside of the formal networks, as we're essentially trusting faculty. Another huge part, an increasing part of engaging faculty, is understanding the social context in which all of this sits. Right? As of actually Friday, the University of Nebraska has this new statement. It's not sort of new, but our official statement is the University of Nebraska-Lincoln does not discriminate. I won't get overly pedantic or academic about how you could parse this in various ways, but I will say in general, yes. And the reason we do not discriminate, this is just a little context of our institution. Since 2008, we've had a state constitutional amendment that says we shall not discriminate in education. And I don't have a lot of, I guess this is an N of 1, but I posit that this has given us some space to explore and think in this space. Because we can't do the things that people are worried, because it's been against the law for like 17 years. Dare I say, this may be the only time you'll ever hear this, but Nebraska was ahead of the cultural curve, let's say, with this constitutional amendment. It has given us some space, I think, to do much of the stuff that I have said. Here's a couple slides as an example of how I onboard faculty on this in, say, a departmental workshop on this. So I introduced this idea of demographic differences. I've thrown this word around a bunch, but I'll stop for a minute here and talk about demographic differences. It's that By differences, we might see different success in our classrooms, right? Some students get A's, B's, and C's. And students come to our classrooms with differential experiences and differential preparation for those courses. And sometimes those can be aligned based on some demographics, race, ethnicity, gender, parental education, etc. And it's when those differences are aligned because of those prior experiences and preparation that it kind of gets on our radar screen here in these UNL course demographic suite. I walk through this slide when I'm working with faculty, first introducing these concepts, which I've already essentially implicitly introduced as we've gone through some of these dashboards. I'd say that we don't really know if these are due to prior experiences. There's a whole lot of stuff that they're arriving at our courses with, and it's kind of unknown. We don't know until they come through our class and we give them grades what those demographic differences are going to be in our class. And it could be that we've expanded that. That pink bar may get bigger. So we're not looking at the position here at the pink bar, but just the height of the pink bar. And that could be unintentional. It could be that we've maintained it, and I might ask, can we do better? It could be that we've reduced it. This is an important point here for faculty to point out that we don't really know what it was beforehand. It could be that you're that bottom bar, that your course is leading to lower demographic differences. But since you don't really know what they were prior, you're still going to see demographic differences in your class. And that can kind of, that can not feel, it can feel not great, right? But understand the context of this larger space of where students are moving through, and potentially that gives some hope. We do obviously aspire to eliminate them, but that takes tremendous informed effort. We may not get there. Another thing, just as basically a pause, you'll notice that there's some words that I have not used in this presentation, and I do not use in this presentation or any of those dashboards, in part because these words have become so laden with additional meaning. They're compacted words that have compacted meaning for different stakeholders. And that just kind of muddies the water for us to have this conversation. So I'm using words that have kind of flat meanings. It means I need to talk in paragraphs. I have to build up that conversation. But I feel like we can make more progress. And it's where we're at culturally. So here's an example of my latest incarnation of trying to say, here's what we're trying to do. So I'll just walk through this analogy briefly. We have letter grades up there, A, B, and C. Our students, using the same meeple analogy, they come to this class, we provide them some ladders, some skills and knowledge to achieve those letter grades. Those students come in with different demographic backgrounds, here represented by the little colors, right? And there's students are combinations of various demographic identities. Some of those demographic identities may be associated with ladders that are different, maybe missing some of those bottom rungs. So in this case, our beige legged students have some missing rungs. What could we do as instructors to help them achieve that same level of A and B that we expect? We're holding those standards. Provide the tools to help them fill in those bottom rungs. Set out some rungs, set out some screwdrivers, set out some stools, maybe even program in that everybody pick up one of those rungs and plays with them, right? I think this is a mental model what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to create successful ladders for all of our students to achieve those same levels of A, B, and C. And if one would expect less, that would not be to our standards within academics. Engaging faculty, full credit, both Unison and also various other consortiums of universities that I've been involved with. We think of Unison maybe at the first as something like the Unison data platform, but the community, the culture of sharing, the conversation when I talk to faculty at Nebraska and I can say, well, this is what they're doing in Florida. I know at Penn State they're thinking about this. Minnesota's been having this conversation. That is part, like faculty and universities do not want to go it alone. That creates this community of moving forward. It's pretty central, I think, to the conversation. Finally, all that I've talked about is very sort of soft and a lot of effort, and all that needs to be done. But we're not forgetting some of the hard checks that already exist in institutions. Annual review for faculty, P&T for faculty, APR programs, biennial program reviews. There's all these structures we've started to take some of these dashboards that we have built and are cementing now and insert them into these processes. Sometimes more successful, less successful. We're trying to continue to find the spots where they stick in with the hope that it outlasts Amy and I. It starts to become an institutional norm that we reflect on these things when we do these normative processes. Some of the external accreditation agencies as well are asking for these, and some of the colleges, and I've helped them incorporate some of these dashboards into their process. And I think there's a couple principles here. One, I want to value reflection, not just success. I have a colleague in biological sciences who was very eager and did a great job of saying, oh, I want to do this thing, and came up with this intervention, this new kind of way that students were going to meet, implemented it, looked at the dashboard, take the temperature, is this working, and found that the equity gaps got worse. Right? And now she's refining the implementation, she's working on it, but we really want to value looking at the data, not just closing those gaps. There's some really good literature that says that change has to be internal to faculty to make these. It can't be imposed. So we can impose, look at this, we can impose, here's some tools, but we can't put high pressure on the details of those gaps. It's just too easy to manipulate data. It has to be an internal drive. But at the same time, when we have success, we want to celebrate it, we want to share it, and all this stuff needs to be aligned with the utility and scope. So for my last moment here, I'll bring forward a little example of a colleague of mine, new faculty, just started this last year, Emily Moore, a fantastic colleague teaching genetics, had heard about these tools from kind of talking about faculty, right? So that open access is really important. So she could just go in and use these tools. And step 1, 2, and 3 in the right corner are some of the interventions that she had structured in her course. And was really excited to see these decreasing gaps there in her midterm exams from 1, 2, and 3. And the bottom one, I can't actually completely re-argue why that fits her pattern. But she was really excited about that pattern on the bottom because it fit this thing, the way she had structured points and the way she'd done it, right? The broader point here is that only she could really understand and interpret this data. I enabled her with these tools. She got excited. She engaged in it. She incorporated this into her annual review that she submitted to the department chair and said, hey, I've used these tools. I'm doing great stuff. And students will benefit because of that. Right? This is what we want. And carrying these case studies around to more faculty is also, I didn't mention that, but a huge part of the next leg of our change is showing people, here's who's using it, here's how they're using it to get that next level of adopters. So I'm going to pass it over to Amy here for a brief wrap up.
Thanks, Chad. Well, I think you've already sort of talked about many of these things. A few lessons that we've learned in the 5 or 6 years that we've been working in this space, and Chad sort of led off with it. We really need to provide broad access to the data and trust that it will be used. As Chad said, the faculty are not breaking down the doors to do extra work. So I think, creating that climate where you prototype and iterate and then answer questions that they care about. It's not just about coming with a preconceived notion of how they should be using the data. They are curious, inquisitive, critical thinkers. And so leveraging their curiosity really empowers them to answer the questions that they care about. We've already talked about a growth mindset that should definitely not be equated. This DFW rates, for instance, should not be equated solely with an instructor's performance. So creating a climate of trust also requires creating a growth mindset, not only for our students, but for our faculty as well. And then something we haven't talked about too much is really communicating the story behind the data as often as we collect it. We're very good at universities of collecting data, maybe even publishing it, but we don't often tell the story. What does it mean to a faculty member on the ground or to a student's experience? And so that's really in my role where I'm really trying to focus. But I think we really wanted to leave time for questions for everybody.
This is our example of our spectacular fireworks display. You can apparently write an N with fireworks because it's all straight lines. Why 2 N's, I'm not sure. But happy for questions.
Thank you so much, Chad and Amy. If you want to come off mute and ask a question, you can do that. Or if you'd like to ask a question in chat, you can do that too.
Chad and Amy, I've got a question.
Hey, good to see you, Dave.
Yes, good to see you too, Chad. I tried to use the chat earlier to say hello, but it was turned off. Bart.
Oh, I see. Okay.
No, it's okay. It's all right. So I'm really curious about how the conversation is going with faculty, like shepherding them through thinking about how to respond to the data and how to think about interventions.
So I'll say two parts on this. One, I'm largely engaging early adopters right now when it's, say, a campus-wide voluntary workshop. And so that group shows up and they kind of already know a bunch of the interventions, right? Like if you're not aware, for everybody on the Zoom, there's a huge literature of all sorts of educational interventions that address demographic differences. For example, active learning is one of the most highly supported. There's meta studies that demonstrate its benefit. So there's a lot of fact that kind of know that. There's also some hints that you kind of got to figure out what works for your class. And so that group kind of comes in and they're well informed. I will say sometimes if I'm invited in for a particular departmental meeting, the faculty meeting where there's a little more obligatory attendance, then there'll be a few more people in there like, well, tell me what to do. What's the one thing I should do? It's like, I don't know. There's 30 things you should do, and I don't know which one will fit. And it might be that you have to do all 30. They all may move the needle 1%. So there's definitely people that want to simplify it. I'm trying to curate those early adopters to set the culture and set the tone. Amy, what's thoughts
Yeah,
on
I
that?
would just to add to that, we had a rollout to faculty in last November, a symposium, and there were 87 faculty who attended. And I just think Chad did a masterful job of identifying faculty who had already used data to sort of support reflection and inquiry and seated them at different tables based on sort of the type of inquiry that they'd be interested in pursuing. I think that's one way we've done this. Another way is through our Center for Transformative Teaching. We've worked with the instructional designers to help them familiarize themselves with these dashboards so that when they're working with individual faculty, they can point to these suite as a resource for their reflection, not only at the end of developing a course, but from the very beginning. What are some of the questions you might be thinking about? It's harder to document impact from that type of work, but that's another area that we've been pursuing.
An example that I gave of Emily, the new faculty who's engaged and developing the course with these tools, that making a lot of progress there.
So, Greg, do you want to go ahead and ask a question? Then I see Eric has a
Yeah.
question in chat.
Yeah, thanks both for sharing this information. So the demographic information is great. It starts revealing those challenges that we can work on. And I was particularly interested when you got down to the assignment level. You know, we saw the example of the person who said, hey, I could see the differences on the clicker questions, or I can start seeing the differences in individual problems. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about kind of the uptake of that level of data, because to me, the larger demographic data shows the problems. We get more actionable information out of those kind of assignment or activity levels. And so could you talk a little bit about the kind of the faculty uptake on that level of data?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit it exactly. Is that like, okay, I've got this course level thing, but my course consists of is individual assignments, or at least quizzes and exams and blah blah blah. And so it allows them to go in and ask another level of questioning that's actionable. To say what Amy said at the beginning, we've got this overall like university retention rate or university graduation rate. And maybe where we started thinking about it is, well, that consists of your classes. Well, really what it consists of is assignment by assignment. And so that's that level that is the most used, the most actionable. Yeah, I don't know if I've fully answered your question, but I'm basically like affirming what you're saying. Say yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and again, I think that's for me that was the most interesting piece to see is when we can get down to that level and say something's going on in activity 4. Okay, now we can start kind of tearing into activity 4 and understanding why there's this broad range of success on that individual activity.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to still have a sense of sample size, that a kind of its intuition I built up over time, and I would say a lot of progress is made in kind of a consultation space when I chat with the faculty and they work through it, and I say, oh well, that's probably noise, but here's a dominant pattern because I'm kind of integrating. Oh, you have a class size of 20, or you have a class size of 300. Those are different things.
And that's where being able to cross different semesters to see those patterns would come in really handy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Somebody asked about Tableau. I'll say in the chat, I'll say all the Tableau, most of the Tableau you've seen, I've just sort of built myself and become essentially a Tableau wrangler. We do have another person who's particularly adept, Ryan Caldwell at the University of Nebraska, that I interact with a lot. But one of the things I showed you was built by Jyotsna, who's interacts with the Unison community deeply and knows Tableau. So I think there's a growing group of people, 5 or 6 people who do a fair amount of Tableau, and we're sort of supporting each other in that space to answer the Tableau question. Bill, go ahead. Bill, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you there. So you're using the UDP for those assignment level things?
Yes, because all we have institutional in our institutional archive is letter grades and some of the demographic information. And so I used that, as I said, for some of these when we're looking at course letter grades, but when we're looking at assignments, we're looking at clicks, all of that is the within course information. Our only source of that is
And that would support Top Hat, for example, but not iClicker, I guess.
Sorry, say that again.
That would support Top Hat, but not iClicker, I guess.
Yeah, I'll pass that to Bart because we don't have extensive use of either of those. Which are the sub things that you could pull from there in terms of
I
that?
do. Yeah, that's a good question, Bill. I do know Top Hat data exists there. I'd have to double check on iClicker data. I don't know if iClicker data exists in the UDP. We had 19 tools represented in 2024. I don't have that list handy, but I don't recall iClicker. James, I see you there popping in. Do you know if we have iClicker data?
We don't have an event stream for iClicker. We have a kind of a hybrid context data dump for Top Hat institutions, and then we get event data from Top Hat.
You know, when I built these, I've really thought about, well, what's a universal thing that everybody's doing, and tried to focus on the thing that can scale. So I haven't really chased much a particular tool that might be in the UDP that a fraction of our faculty. I would say that's version 2 or 3, where I could build out some of those more details. But there's a disappointment to me, and it's Canvas, but they have not given in the Caliper event, so it does not go into the click stream, the individual clicks happening within a Canvas quiz. I just know that somebody's entered a quiz and they left a quiz. It's disappointing to me that Canvas has not stepped up to provide that data. So there's limitations. At this point, everybody's kind of like discovering it, and nobody's too worried about those limitations, but it's not universal information.
Okay. And could you put the GitHub link in the chat?
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. I'll do that right now.
Thanks.
Well, we're at the top of the hour here. I want to thank Amy and thank Chad. Well done. It's always great to hear about what you've done and also where you're going with the Meeples and Peoples activity and some of the other things you have on the horizon. So maybe we can have you back in the future. So thank you, everyone. We'll follow up with an email once the recording is posted, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
And happy to hang if anybody has a follow-up question here.
I will not shut down the meeting room then if you have some extra time to hang around.
Yeah, if somebody has a quick question.
Yeah,
I will stop recording though.
Just to follow up a little bit. I'm instructor.